Hey, welcome to the Latoya Carr Show. Where is my handbook? The name was inspired because life comes at such a fast pace and it does not come with a handbook. Therefore, this podcast will talk about the many different facets of everyday living, and that can include parenting, business, family, friendships, relationships, basically everything that you will sit at your kitchen table and talk about. I started the podcast on anchor.fm. For those of you that are listening who may be wanting to start your own podcast, go to anchor.fm to start your own podcast. It is free and very easy to navigate. Again, welcome to the Latoya Carr Show. Where is my handbook? Hello, Chrissy.
Hey, Toya.
All right.
How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
So, for those of you who will be tuning in, I have the dynamic preacher, Reverend Chrissy Belton here with me today. And we are going to talk about dating woes as a preacher. So I wanted to bring Reverend Chrissy on because just watching her as a young preacher, we're close in age, and just watching her as powerful as she is in the pulpit, but yet still being someone that desires to date and have a love life, the desire for marriage.
Yes.
I thought that it would be great to, bring her on the show, because I think so often people, they tend to put pastors or preachers in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And so one on again that's, that can speak to the younger population and give us some sense of hope, or just to even open up about dating woes or some of the good things about dating as a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it dating as a preacher?
Whew, yeah. Okay, so that's a loaded question. How is it? It's interesting. I think it really depends on where you meet the person that changes the mood or whatever. But for me, it's been up and down. And so I've been a preacher for quite some time. And then before that, I was a PK. So it was always like some, spiritual role or leadership. So it's always been like either I was, my father, he was the pastor of my first church. And then it was my grandfather, grandfather's church. I grew up in that. So it's always been like, some type of leadership in the church. And so when I started dating, I actually started preaching before I really started dating, it's been interesting. Like I said, it depends on where you meet the person. So if I met them in a church setting, it can be interesting in the sense of, they're like, oh yeah, I saw you preaching, and and then all they want to talk about is church. And I'm like, okay, I'm a person too, what's your favorite food? Like relax,
Right.
It ain't gotta be all about church. I don't need to hear about, the sermon you think you want to preach one day, like let's just relax, so it's interesting. If I have done both ends. Sometimes I'm like, I'll tell them I'm a preacher if they don't know. Sometimes I don't, but then when I do, everything changes. So it's just interesting. But it's good and bad. You just kind of got to take it as it comes. But for me, I'm like, look, it's my life's calling. Just as if somebody's life's calling was to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Right.
Like, you don't, I think it's the idea of, oh my God, she's a preacher. She speaks for God. I'm like, relax. Bring it in, okay? I like to paint. I like to go out. I just need you to remember I'm a person, as well. And I think, that's what makes it so crazy is the I don't know, the way they look at you, like not a person, like, like I'm
Yeah.
still a person. So, but it's been interesting. I've had good and bad, not bad experiences, but just interesting experiences. I don't, really think it's negative,
Mhm.
but it's been others who kind of make it more difficult than it needs to be. Like it doesn't need to be that hard at
So
all. So.
how do you determine how quickly you tell them?
So yeah, so first I used to start off like, so sometimes I don't have to tell. You know what I mean? Like I said, if it was like in a church setting, not necessarily my church, but if they saw me preaching out or something, and the child them DMs, so them DMs gonna get you in trouble, So I was like, okay, oh yeah, you came to my church or whatever. So it depends on how they met. I don't have to say anything, but if
Mhm.
they haven't met me in church, we'll talk about church. It's not the first thing. I used to make it like the first thing, just to let's get it out out the table, get it on the table or whatever. But
Right.
just, I guess you just use it case by case. So sometimes I will, but if I know the person, it just depends on when you meet them, because sometimes like I kind of already know the person. And so I know you love God, yada, yada. You might not know that I'm a preacher, but if I meet them out somewhere, like at a grocery store or something, the question kind of early on always goes, especially if you're talking on the phone first, it kind of always goes, what do you do? Right. And so I'll start off with, graphic design, artists, all of that other stuff, and I serve at my church on the ministerial staff. So sometimes I'll say it like that. I serve on a ministerial staff. They're like, so you preach? And I'm like,
right.
Yeah, like,
see if they pick it up.
Right. And they be like, yes, because, they like, some be like, oh, okay. And then the phone call stopped, right? Or then they be like, okay, that's cool, but it's like you didn't later see whether it's cool or not. But I kind of make it earlier than later, because it's like, it's no sense in holding any part of myself back. Like, it's not something I'm ashamed of, right? So it's like, let me just, this is who I am, I'm grateful for it. And, it's call on my life. So let's if you ain't cool with it, let's find out sooner than later.
Right.
Yeah,
so do you find that when, like you mentioned, sometimes the phone calls will stop. Do you find that some people, even if the phone calls don't stop, that they say, they're okay with it, but then you realize, or you kind of know that they're really not, or they treat you different?
Oh yeah, so yeah, we done definitely experienced that. They were like, oh yeah, that's no problem, that's praise God, then they change in their language, you know what I mean? So all of a sudden everything's praise God, everything's, you're a blessing, you are God, God bless you, all the stuff that they weren't saying, prior to. So it's like every other word don't have to be praise God, God, but like that.
Right.
So they'll say they're cool. We'll probably go out a couple more times. But like you said, then like after a while, something happens, right? And they'll blame it on something else, but it's like, okay, but you always had that job, now.
Yeah.
Oh, things just been picked up. It's nothing wrong. It's just things picked up. But yeah, we can hang. I was like, well, we was moving towards something. Now you're talking about hanging.
Yeah.
So it done, something done changed, right? And so I've experienced it, and it's just, I'm like, okay, it is what it is, because whoever is for me, is going to be for all of who I am, and that won't bother them. So I'm just like, okay, well, thank you for eliminating yourself. God bless you. Let those go. That others may come,
And I find it
like
real
so
interesting too, because like before, I would kind of not want to say it up front, because I didn't want a certain stigma, or stereotype, and so I really didn't want that on. I wanted. Now I find myself like, kind of like what you said earlier, like, this is my life, this is what God has called me to do, so it's not going to change, clearly. So either you're here or you're not, and so even with that, do you find yourself like, so we know what we're called to do, and we're standing on that, but do you still find that it's a struggle, or you've moved away from the struggle piece of it?
So it's ebbs and flows. So it's like, there's been seasons when I'm like, I'm completely fine with it. Either y'all for it or you're not. forget y'all, right?
Yeah,
So, and I'm
yeah,
just standing in that, I'm strong in that, and I'm okay with it. But then there are times when I'm just like, well, God, why is it so difficult? And
yeah.
so, because I'm like, it shouldn't be a stigma though. It's like, this is a great thing. God has called us, to proclaim the gospel, to, serve his people. And it's not just about the pulpit, but I think a lot of people focus on you preach behind a pulpit. You know what I mean? But it's
Yeah.
like, it's more than that. I'm called to help people in hard times and serve them and, all this other stuff, celebrating with them, so and walk through life with people. God's called us to do that as ministers. It's not just preaching a sermon, but
Right.
unfortunately they don't see, a lot of people just see, oh my God, the pulpit, so that scares them. But yeah, I do find there have been times when I'm just like, God, why is this super difficult? Especially like, because I've been so young in it. Like, I was like, it would have been great if I could have just found the one and then you called me,
Right.
But this like having this call while trying to find the one has been a roller coaster. So yeah, the times when I'm like, okay, it's, I'm not like ecstatic about it because it just seems so difficult. But then then I just take joy in knowing, look, God, the desires of my heart. I always go back to that. God knows the desires of my heart, and he will give me the desires of my heart. And so if the desire is there, I just believe that, God would remove the desire. If that's not something he wanted for my life, I believe that God would not have put that desire in my heart. But because I believe I'm supposed to build with someone, grow with someone, and live life with someone and be someone's partner and helpmate, I just believe that it's going to come to pass, And so I'm like, when it don't work out, I'm like, okay, then you were not the one, We're
Right.
going to keep it pushing, keep it moving and keep it pushing, But
Right.
yeah, I've definitely had times where I'm okay with it. And then I had times where I'm like, it's so difficult. What in the world? But
Right. Right.
it comes and goes, but you just take joy in knowing that God knows what he's doing,
And
So.
it's a couple of things that you said, but do you think that, so what's your thoughts on, or have you even thought about, like, do you prefer someone that's already a preacher, or someone that's not necessarily in the ministry, or does it even matter? Because I always I think I used to think that it would be easier if I had someone to walk this journey with, right?
Okay.
But I recently had a revelation, or it was just like, because I was kind of beating myself up about it, like, okay,
No.
Is he really going to understand what I go through if he's not a preacher? Or maybe it will be easier if he's in the ministry, and then I don't have to constantly explain myself. But like, one of the things that you mentioned was God knows the desire of your heart. And so I had to recently come to grips with you do know, God does know the desires of my heart, and I am going to stand on his promises and know that I'll be married. And no, they don't have to be in the ministry to understand me. Whoever that person is will understand that, there's a life outside of the church walls, and they'll be, supportive in anything that I do, not just ministry. So
yes.
What's your thoughts on dating a fellow preacher, or does it matter?
Yeah, so for me, it really doesn't matter. My first boyfriend, like I said, I've been doing this since 17. So my very first boyfriend was not in the ministry per se, but we were PKs. So he understood, what it is to, grow up with a minister. His father and his mother were preachers and pastors. So it kind of worked because he already had an understanding of, being with someone, growing up, someone who's called. But for me, it doesn't matter. It just, I've done both. I've, dated preachers and I've dated people who aren't preachers, but it doesn't matter. I think for me, it's more so someone who can understand, someone who gets it enough to the point of, and supportive of it. I don't need you to hear the sermon intro. I don't need you to do all that. Like I just need your support. If I want to run something by you, if I want to, or you say, hey, what you preach, and then you share it with them. There have been some preachers that take things at like I want to, unfortunately, like a competition, Oh,
yeah.
So, yeah, I preached that text before. See, when I did it, I came from the angle of, I didn't ask you.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you what angle you came from, brother. But, so it is sometimes it's good to, have someone to, bounce stuff off of, but like I said, I know enough preachers. I got enough preachers in my family that I could do that with.
Exactly.
I got enough friends, preacher friends that I could do that with. So for me, I don't necessarily need them to be a preacher, but just someone who understands and, if, be like, oh, I gotta get up or I'm writing something down, that they can understand that there's just times when God will drop something, but, yeah. For me, it doesn't matter for me, honestly. Yeah, but I think at first I thought that maybe they needed to be, because like I grew up. My example is my mom and dad. They're both preachers. My aunt and uncle both preachers. My other aunt and uncle, so I grew up with that both and. But I also got to remember it happened. Like they were married and then they, called individually. So it's like, okay, because they don't necessarily have to be, so at this point I'm just like, yeah, God, whatever, I want a supportive husband. I want a husband that I can support what he's doing, and that we can just rock together. So yeah, they don't have to be. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So do you think it made it easier because, you've mentioned seeing certain examples, and did you think that seeing the examples, was a challenge for you? Like, or do you think that it helped you see things in a different light, like seeing examples of people being, married that were both preachers? Do you think that, it kind of changed your thought process on what you should have in your own relationship?
See, I don't know, because it's different, because with the examples I have, they were married and then they were called, so like my mom and dad got married first, and then I believe my mom was called, or my dad, so it wasn't like they were already ministers. So for me, I feel like I'm kind of breaking the mold in a way, because they were both, and even my aunt and uncle, they met in college, then got married, then started going, and then were called, first my uncle, then my aunt, and, the same with another. So it's like, I'm really, when I think about it, I think I'm the only one who called right now, called early, started preaching, and now I'm in this dating scene, right? So it's like I don't really have that as an example, and so in my it's hopeful. It's good to be able to look and say, okay, I can have that kind of a partner, period, as far as marriage,
right?
It's good to have that example as far as marriage per se, but as far as like a single preacher dating, really me and my sister, my other sister, she called as well. We're the first to kind of really do it that way. So, yeah. So it's like, it's helpful in knowing that marriage is attainable.
Yeah.
But in this single state as a preacher, I'm just like, I guess I'm the first to kind of ride this thing out, show us what it's like, as a single person, then, going to be married. But yeah, so it's good to have that example, to be like, there is hope for marriage point blank. But yeah, I'm like, and they all got married very young. I'm past that age. So I'm past that age. So sometimes it's like, all right, Lord, we running out of time, but you do all things well.
Right.
Well, I need you to hurry this along. But yeah, so it's good to have those examples. I'm like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I see it. I've seen it lived out. But yeah, as far as the details of it, it's like, yeah, I kind of don't really have an example in that per se. But yeah,
I think it's so funny, like, to be, a preacher and then like to be young, but it's like, okay, all right, God, I believe in your word. I understand. Mm-hmm. I know that you got me. Yeah. But I always tell people, like, I know if I don't know anything that will bring you closer to God, I know that love and money will definitely bring you close to God.
That's good. That's
so
good. Yes.
I'm just like, man, like, of course, like um my dating life is non-existent. Okay.
Oh no. Not right now. Not right now.
Right. But like when I was at a point to where like I actually was in love, it was before I answered the call to preach. And so sometimes I find myself looking back at that like, man, I know I would do things differently, not just because of, being called to preach, but just because I was younger then too. But the challenge of, wanting to do God's will and then wanting to love is kind of like, should this be a battle? Like, what do you think the most, what do you think the most challenging thing is as a young preacher dating? Because I feel like people almost think that we're supposed to meet somebody and get married, right? Like preachers shouldn't date. Like it is almost the way I feel like it should be. I'm like, we know, it don't work like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you can get married early, or you know what I'm saying, like know that, okay, well, we might not date for a long time before we get married. I do believe that that's possible. But I think that a lot of people that aren't in the ministry look at us as if like, first of all, they're going to look and think that if you dating that you automatically having sex, or, if you are dating, you're not supposed to have sex. It's so many different things that goes with preachers and dating, right? So what do you think the most challenging thing is as a young preacher dating?
Yeah, so you kind of said a lot of it, but I think the most challenging thing is that they don't expect you to be dating. I don't know if they don't expect you to be dating, or there's, first of all, for male and female, there's two different perspectives, like a double standard. So it's kind of okay for the male preachers to date, and they out there doing whatever they want to do, Chad. But it's like, well, who is they dating? They dating women, and sometimes those women are female preachers, right? So it's like, it's so crazy. It's like, they can date, but it's weird, I think, for some people to think of their preacher or minister, like you say, out on dates. And I think it's sometimes because of what they do on dates that then they can't fathom, that where y'all go, what y'all do, how long you say, mind your business, first of all. But second of all, it's like, I'm not you, you know what I mean? And I think people put on the you what they would do or how they behave, and so then that's what makes them nervous, is that my preacher is out there dating. Like, dating is such a broad, topic that, you could be at a baseball game. You can, you can be at the bar. You can go at a restaurant, So I think, people try to box preachers in is you're just supposed to one day pop up married. Well, how do you get there? You have to date. You have to date in order to get married, and you got to go on dates to marry. So I think the hard part is, first of all, there's that double standard that's between the male and female, but that's a whole different topic for a whole nother show. But there's that. But then, like you said, it's like, I have to remember that I am a woman. I am whole. God called me, but God also, has this, I placed this desire for love in my heart. The way for that to come to pass is to be out and is to be dating, and that I can't let other people's, uncomfortable, whatever, I can't let their discomforts come on me, that I have to live my life of wholeness, that God came to have abundant life. And part of that abundance does include love. And the way for love to come is to date, And so I think the hard part is just, kind of pushing out of your mind what others are thinking, even then it's just the people that, oh, great, Chrissy, every time some who they think may be single, a single person come into church, Chrissy, did you see? Did you see? I listen. Like I'm not. Then there's this perception of that's like they try to hurry up and marry you off
Yes,
because they feel
yes.
like that would make them more comfortable, right? And so then again, that's their people's comfort. It would make them more comfortable if I'd hurry up and get married, right? But it's not about hurrying up and getting married. It's about finding the person that God has ordained for me to be with. And so, that I can't rush with that, and so that requires dates, then that's what it's going to take. But I think the most difficult part is dealing with other people's perceptions of, of you as a minister dating. And it's like, look, I can go out for dinner and then I can get up the next morning and preach because, exactly. That one does not negate the other. You know what I mean? Like I can go out on a Saturday night and then I can get up on a Sunday morning because I am a whole person, and, I don't know. It's just dealing with other people's perceptions, I think, is the most difficult part. Them trying to put on you what they think you should be doing, or them trying to guess what you're doing because they don't know. Right. And I'm like, well, don't make up,
Right.
Don't put your behaviors on me, So
and perception is a major thing because
crazy.
Even when I think about my own family, I had to come to the realization that they don't. First of all, because they don't live here, and so I left home when I was 17 and I haven't lived there since. Of course, like I visit there a lot, but it's still different because they don't see me in church. They don't, see, they see that I like to hang out, and they don't get that part of how that goes with church.
Right, right.
And so perception can be, I think that perception can make or break you. Because for a long time I was like I didn't even really tell like a lot of people in my family. Of course, word travels, so people are gonna say,
girl, I heard.
Yeah. well Toya's preaching, but then like even when people don't say things, that they're looking at, well, how's she preaching if like she still hang out? And I think for me, I tell people all the time, I thank God for our pastors because they are so freeing. And so because they teach and preach the way that they do, I think they allow, for me being a young minister, they allow me to still be young and still realize what my relationship with God, that's what actually matters. And so I think that helps me with a lot of things. But in terms of people marrying you off and like it's a lot because I feel like you said, is their comfort level like, I don't really, it's almost like it's like, well, yeah, you can preach or yeah, you can pray for me, but I don't really want you to do this, even if I may be doing it. And so people, because they put you on this unspoken pedestal, and it's like, I ain't even asked to be here.
I didn't. No, I'm gonna get off that. Let me just cut that pedestal and bring that. Yes. Let me step off of that. No,
you putting me somewhere I didn't ask to be. Just like God has you somewhere that, of course, none of us asked to do it, but it's about a matter of obedience. And just like for me, it's more. I'm more at peace with it now. But before it was very challenging. And then it's almost like, you're not hiding your life necessarily, but because you don't speak on certain things, people are like, oh, they sneaky, or, what exactly are they doing? Like, kind of like what you asked earlier, or what you mentioned earlier about, it's nobody's business. But I think that people, they have unspoken expectations of what a preacher should be. But the reality of it is, how should a preacher be? Like, can anybody really answer that question?
No. It's just great. Like I said, it's other people putting their thoughts on you. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm single. How am I supposed to not be single? I got a date,
Right.
So like I said, it's like, like you say, you can't allow others to box you in, like I said, I was young. I'm a young preacher. Like I told you, I preached my first initial sermon at the age of 17. Just started college. I was a freshman in college. And so with that, comes a lot of stuff. So it's like, look, I've been doing this for quite some time, trying to explain to people, not only I did homework, and then I'm like, well, what are you doing? Did you finish that? Well, I'm writing my sermon. Oh, you a preacher? So I'm like in the library writing sermons and stuff, but it's like, okay, but then you wasn't just hanging out with us, at the game. Yeah, I can do that and then go to church, so it's like, you just I did not, and I'm grateful for this. I had family who supported, me living my life, and still being called, so it wasn't like, it wasn't like, they wouldn't invite me to stuff or, like that, or be like, oh my Lord, you was where? Girl, don't you know you got to preach next week,
Right.
You went where with who, no, they, encourage, because I think it's important, because that's how we end up with preachers who go off the deep end and do crazy things when they suppress who they are, so if you want to go to the India concert, go, you know what I mean? Like there are, and it's all in, and it's about your relationship with God, right? So I don't want to ever say anything like over the whole scope, but you have to know what you're comfortable with and your relationship with God. But for me, it's okay to go to the India concert, Friday night, and then a prepared sermon, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because I can't, I don't want to suppress who I am in my wholeness. God came that we might have life in that more abundantly.
Absolutely.
And for me, that includes an India concert. For me, that includes going out and hanging out. For me, it includes that celebrating friends at different places. It includes all of that. And I don't believe God desires for us to just be locked up in our office reading the Strong's Concordance in the Bible in different translations. Like, no, a lot of things that we minister from the pulpit comes in living life. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know how many times I was out and I was like, oh my goodness, let me write this down. You know what I mean? Like, it came, as Pastor says, preach life, you got to live it, you can't just be in the closet waiting for a sermon to drop. Like, you have to live. And as you live life, a lot of what you're going to minister comes out of living life, and so it's interesting. You're going to have some who be like, oh, I know you left. What time you leave? I hope you left early. I'm like, excuse me, I don't have a curfew. I'm grown, all the way grown. Okay. And I, being out, I can go out and I know when to come in, but it's about balance, and you knowing who you are and not allowing other people to put on you, well, we got to get Chrissy in the house. She got to preach tomorrow. It's Saturday night. Y'all know Chrissy got to preach. Your friends might say it as a joke or whatever, but at this point, I'm like, really, y'all, so people may say it as a joke, but, for the most part, I don't, I've grown past that. Any little small comments or whatever, I'm like, okay, you haven't grown to the place that I've grown to, and that's okay. I don't try to put my understanding of my relationship with God on others. I just know I can rest in knowing, that I am whole, and that I'm, walking in my truth, and walking in my calling at the same time, that it's all together.
And I think that the last part that you just said, like walking in your truth and, not placing your, where you are on other people, is important in every aspect. Like, so I think I mentioned recently to someone, like, that I was a preacher, and it was funny because his thing was, oh, well, let me not say certain things. I'm like, no. Because what, I got a hell? I don't have a heaven or hell to send you, right? At all. And you gotta realize that, like, my explanation to him was kind of like, listen, it's one of these things, like, what attracted you to me, what we've been talking, like, that's me, period. Yes. So it's not going to change, or it shouldn't change because I say, like, oh, I preach. Like, it shouldn't change. And so if you focus on that one little
thing, I am. Right. If you focus on that, then it can,
then you're gonna have yourself being caught up in this whole mind game that we shouldn't even be at. And so I think a lot of people, they don't focus on what attracted them to you at first. And then some people, like, I don't really think he meant any. I think like some people, it also scares them a little bit, because we know when something is new, it's like, how do I deal with that?
How do I navigate this? Yeah, this is new for me.
Yeah, and so it's like, shoot, you just listen. We all in this together. Let's navigate this thing together, because it's really, what would have been different if I wouldn't have told you, or if I wasn't a preacher,
Right.
And so I think, basically, as long as we stay true to ourselves, then all else will follow,
I definitely agree. Yeah.
So if you could like say anything to someone that's new in the ministry and maybe struggling with dating or just starting out dating, what would you tell them?
New to the ministry, just starting out dating, I would definitely first of all, like we already kind of talked about, but be true to yourself. Like just have a sit with yourself for a moment. Be true with yourself and with God. God, listen, I thank you for the call. I'm going to live this call out. God, I do have a desire to be married. God, help me in my date, and just really take the pressure off of it. Because I think a lot of times we put pressure on it when it's unnecessary. And then, so then it's just, it makes it so much harder than I think it needs to be. Like, dating can be fun. If I've had fun dates, like, it can be fun, and just like, God, help me. The same God that gives you discernment in which scriptures to preach from, or what, the same God that gives you discernment for ministry, the same God gives you discernment in dating. And just relax and know that God's got you. Like, God's got you. He knew when he would call you. He knew, where you would be, what your relationship status would be. Just breathe in, breathe out, and know that God's got you in this, and that God is not setting you up for failure. Like sometimes I think we think, God, why did you do this to me? But like, you could have called me after I failed him. But like, we don't know where that person is. So maybe it's in the terms of as we minister, as we're going out ministering. We don't know. So it's like, God is not setting us up. God does not give us a call to make our lives miserable, but it's up to us. It's our perspective of how we see it. And I take joy in knowing that God loves me enough to not only call me to preach, but to send me someone who will love me, as I continue to preach his word and to minister to his people and serve his people. And so I would say, relax, take the pressure off of it. Don't allow others, other people's weight to come on you. You know what I mean? Don't let other people's perceptions and discomforts become your discomforts, right? Like, who you are, who God has called you to be, so rest assured and knowing that God's got you. Even this detail of marriage, God's got you, even in your journey towards being married, that it's going to be well. And, who's for you is for you, and just walk this thing out one step at a time, one date at a time.
Right.
One date at a time, and don't let other people, I would also say, because sometimes it can get disheartening. Sometimes it's like, it can get very, I ain't even gonna play and act like it's all fun and games, but it can get disheartening to be like, okay, so if that would have worked out if I wasn't a preacher. Okay, God, so it's like, well, that's not fair. Like everything else was fine, and then that, is what I realized they really couldn't deal with. And so you will get discouraged, but don't rest in that discouragement. Lift yourself out and know that, God loves you enough to send you someone who can handle all of who you are. And that includes the call that's on your life. Yeah.
That's good. And I want to piggyback on something Reverend Chrissy just said about it can get discouraging.
Oh, yeah.
And, you will think about well, God, really, this what we doing, but like she mentioned, it's not a setup. Like, there's no way he would call you to do something so great, to have you feel so low. So just trust in the word, trust in, his promises, and know that, again, this is not a setup, and he hears the desires of our hearts. And so it's not so much of making it out to be harder than it has to be, but just like Reverend Chrissy said, just relax and enjoy the moment. I think so often we even feel like sometimes, like we already have pressure, but then we kind of put more pressure on ourselves, like, I can't do this, I can't do that, when we need to just, take a step back, breathe in, and just relax and enjoy the moment. Because just because you date, or just because you find yourself talking to someone, it doesn't mean that that's the end. Like, it would be great to, like, meet somebody. Hey, great.
Listen, wrap this up. We're done. We're out of here.
Yes, going down the altar.
We going down the altar. Let's go.
Time, use the dating scene as a time to get to know yourself. I think that, a lot of times, because we won't know what, we can know what we desire, but we wouldn't know how to really handle desires sometimes unless we actually grow or go through something.
That's true.
So just enjoy the moment. And I just really want to thank Reverend Chrissy for, deciding to talk on this topic, because I think it's like something that we really need. Like, so often we think that church people have it all together. Like, we don't go through anything. Again, people put ministers, pastors, put us on a pedestal that we really didn't ask for. And so it's good sometimes to know that other people go through similar things. So I definitely thank you for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes. This has been really good. And so, of course, I will be bringing you back on for more entrepreneur stuff.
Yay.
And other things that we may need for the future for our young people, just to give people a hope, especially during this time, like, with everything going on. So again, I thank you for being here. You guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode to the preach, even if you're not a preacher, even if you're just a young person stepping out on a dating scene, just relax, take time to get to know yourself and enjoy the moment. Thanks again, Reverend Chrissy.
Thank you. You're so welcome.
Show. All right,
thanks.